and welcome again to Theories of Reality. I'm Professor Borrowdale, and this is our second class. The first class we talked about a little bit about truth and reality and the correspondence theory of truth. And there's that little handout in Moodle. Maybe I'll just call that up right now. The What is Truth handout. Make sure to look at that because there'll be several questions on the exam about it. A little bit of overlap with the Theories of Knowledge class. Caps lock again. Tab. There we go. Oh, could you guys hit the mute button on your microphone? Oh, there's not a thing. Okay. Okay. Good deal. And then if you want to talk, just unmute and then mute again when you're done. Welcome to Susan Cottage Grove over there. Let's see. Just to remind you, in order to keep people in other states from running a scam on the school. No, I don't want to say. I didn't like it. I have to take roll the first week. Oh, I just changed my password, didn't I? Oh, let's see. Do I remember what it is? I'm great until I change it, and then it's like, what did I change it to? I wrote it down, though. So please post to the personal introductions forum. There may be a couple of students that were late registration that weren't in groups. I have to put students manually in groups, whether Studio Classroom, Cottage Grove, online. So I just did that, a few extra students early this morning. So you should be able to post to that. And I'll have the in-class roster too. By the way, did somebody in the front volunteer a piece of binder paper for the roll today? Either you or Florian? Okay, thanks a lot. And just if you would put Philosophy 203 and Thursday up there. And then I've got the one from Tuesday, and hopefully everything will be okay as far as enrollments go. Is there anyone who's not registered already that would like to add the class? Okay. Did you send me an email yet? So, what's your name?
I got a response.
Okay, good. Okay, yeah. So I cleared you to add, or I said, okay, cool. All right. And maybe put a little note, like, going to add or something when the roster comes around, just so all done now, to double check. All right. Look at my password list here. A super secret place in my computer. No, that's the old one. Okay. I decided to change it after typing it publicly on the screen, going out to cable television and live streaming on the internet, and to everybody in the class here, just in case somebody was writing it down. My social security number is 56. All right, there we go. And here's Philosophy 203. So please make sure you've read the syllabus, which is right at the top here, and then gone down to the personal introductions forum, and just click on the topics. You'll see. Let's see. Just for the studio sections, here's what you'll see. And then I see is 22 that are already posted there. Just click on the topic and then click the reply button. There we go. And click the top reply button here and you'll be good to go. And just type in a brief introduction. And please, if you haven't done that, do that right after class. I'm going to give it a little bit more time and do my drops tomorrow, Friday, instead of this afternoon, just because of the missed day at the beginning, the missed day and a half at the beginning of the term. So please, that will help me confirm my registrations. It's especially important for the cable students, but also a requirement for the students in class here. It also helps me get to know students. And if you don't have a picture in Moodle already, if you have a picture, take a picture with your phone or something and put a selfie up there, just like of your face, so they'll help me learn your name and know who you are. Put on the beauty face and, run it through some Instagram thing. You'll look beautiful. I've got this new phone. I've been taking selfies everywhere. I took a funny, I was in Walmart the other day and I was buying some Ivory soap. And I see it's got the descriptions in both, it's got the label in both English and French. I'm like, French? Really? The French use soap? It was sort of, I think they have the lowest per capita soap consumption in any of the modern industrial world. So it was a gag. I mean, I'll put it up on my Facebook or something. It's just funny. Why you French? So maybe that's where they make Ivory soap. Like they're multinational and they've headquartered in France. I don't know. I just love the Ivory soap though. No perfumes, all natural, totally sustainable. Okay, other requirements. So grab the book at the LCC bookstore, and today we'll be talking about Chapter 1, What is Truth, What is Philosophy? Make sure to read this What is Truth handout here. And then you see the PowerPoint for today is right here, talking about the apology. I think I've got some stuff about class mechanics. Hopefully none of it's outdated. Let's see. Hopefully this will... yeah, log in. Instead of just logging in Moodle, I'd like you also to post to the forum. Let me just check for a second. Participants list. Let's see who hasn't logged in. Am I violating federal privacy laws? Probably 12 of them. These FERPA regulations. So it looks like there's 3 people that haven't posted. Some of those might be recent ads. So if you're one of those 3 people, please make sure to log in the Moodle course. For one reason, because the syllabus is right here, and I went over the syllabus briefly in class, but you're responsible for all this information in here. And let's see, other thing. I think that's all as far as boring course mechanics stuff. So let's get back to doing real philosophy. Any questions about this What is Truth handout? Let's start out with that. I didn't really talk about cultural... Yeah, go ahead.
Where do you want us to post the answers to our questions?
Oh, so those are just for your reviewing the material and to get you to think about what you read and be prepared for class discussion, but I don't collect those. So I have other classes where I have required forums. This one's just not one of them, because they always cap my enrollment's pretty high in my online classes. I got like 40 in there, and I've got a full cadre of students. So I only have forums in certain of the classes. And so this one, you just have 2 midterms and a final.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. Let's talk about maybe these study questions. What's the difference between a relativist, a person who says truth is in the eye of the beholder, and a skeptic who says that truth is unattainable or hard to come by? Anyone want to take a shot at that? I would maybe take something simpler. What's the difference between the correspondence theory of truth and the relativist theory of truth? Let's stick with that. Nobody read about Socrates. Nobody read this handout. It's in the Moodle. We talked about this a little bit last time, didn't we? Thinking back. Anybody not sign the roll sheet? I'll get you guys during the break. Okay, well, let's just start out with the correspondence theory of truth. Correspondence theory of truth says that truth is a quality which applies to beliefs and statements and also propositions, which are sort of it's the abstract thing that's expressed in beliefs and statements, which is true or false. So the cat is on the mat. The cat is on the mat when it's uttered, or written down as a statement. When you're holding that thought in your mind, you have a belief that the cat really is on the mat. That's a belief. Philosophers call it a propositional attitude, such that you think the cat and the mat are related in a certain way. And then it can be expressed in different sentences in different languages, like in French, right? What is it? Le chat est sur le mat, or something like that, right? So the cat is on the mat, and it has the same meaning, the same propositional content. A proposition is just the abstract thing that's true or false. That can be expressed in a belief in your head. It can be expressed in an utterance, in a statement or a sentence. It can be written down. And so these are different ways of expressing the same proposition, which is a little different than an idea, right? An idea doesn't make a truth claim. An idea is like, the idea of love, or the idea of God, or the idea of a chair, right? You're not really making a claim about the world. It's just like a concept. But a proposition, it says something about the world. It says that something exists. It says that the world is a certain way. So that a proposition is different, a little different than an idea. A proposition could be true or false. Ideas can't be true or false. Like if I say, the idea of a chair, true or false? Okay, there you say, well, there is such a thing as a chair. Yeah, but that's not what I said. I'm just talking about, is the idea of a chair itself true or false? It doesn't really make any sense, right? But if I say, there are chairs in this room, that's obviously true. Or if I show you like a piece of furniture and I ask, is this a chair? And maybe it's like a beanbag flopped on the floor, and some people say, well, no, that's not a chair. And then somebody else says, no, it's a beanbag chair. And then you get this description like, what is a chair? Does it have to be raised off the ground? Does it have to have legs? Blah, blah, blah. And then you have a discussion about the different propositions and whether they're true or false. But just the idea of a chair is just an idea. It's not a proposition. A proposition expresses truth about the world. Or it may express something false about the world. But it makes a truth claim. It says such and such is true. If I say the cat is on the mat, what I'm really saying is the sentence, the cat is on the mat, is true. I'm putting it out there as a declarative statement. I'm claiming something is true about the world, which is just another way of saying the world is a certain way, or the world contains a certain thing. So the correspondence theory of truth is, I like to think about as like the ordinary, poison the well a little bit here, the ordinary definition of truth that all of us hold. Day to day, you say, what might be an example of a belief you would have that would come up where you'd either judge it to be true or false, just some sort of pedestrian day-to-day thing. You think of like something, a belief that you had, you changed your mind about, not something like whether there's a God, but pick something kind of mundane.
Driving is better than the bus.
Driving is better than the bus. So that's a value judgment. How about something more like empirical, like
it's bad to steal.
That's not empirical. That's like totally more towards the moral thing, right? So.
Guacamole is bad.
Well, it's the good and bad. Those are value
totally
judgments. Now, that's a funny thing because I used to think guacamole was totally disgusting. I called it Cthulhu spores, and I thought it was hideous. And then like something happened when I hit middle age, and I'm like, I like tried a little bit. I'm like, this really have a lot of taste to it, and it's a good substitute for cheese, and it's kind of like thick and mixed in this burrito. This is kind of good. I think I like guacamole, and it was weird because I was just totally same thing with mustard and spicy food. Anyway, but that's personal taste though. How about something like, okay, how about traffic is thick going down the 126 towards East Springfield, right? And suppose like I believe like, oh, I can get to East Springfield in 15 minutes at 5 o'clock, right? And that's my belief, and by God, I'm going to be there on time. And it's 5:15, 5:20. I ended up not getting there till 5:30, right? It turned out my belief was false. That traffic there is just awful. If you're getting on the 126, heading towards Springfield, it's slow going. You got those two traffic lights and people merging in from the I-5, and it's a mess. Or I don't know, something else, a belief that you'd have that's just sort of day to day, or you'd say something's true, something's false. Yeah.
Out of milk at home.
There you go. You're out of milk at home. So that would be that'd be something that I suppose you just say it's true. It's just a belief you would have, right? And some of these beliefs, like you don't even really make a judgment; they just happen automatically, right? Like your belief that you're sitting in a classroom, your belief that the instructor is speaking, right? Those are all beliefs that just sort of happen to you. You don't really make a choice about them. But then maybe you make some other choices about things, like you make a judgment, like I don't know. I'm changing my major to economics from philosophy because I want to earn a lot of money, and it's my belief that philosophers don't earn much money. So that might be a belief you would have, and you make some choices on the basis of it. And so all the time you make predictions about the future based on what you think is going to be true in the future. Maybe you make judgments in the past. You might think, I used to think I just had a string of bad luck with all these terrible relationships. But then I got into therapy and realized, oh no, I was attracting these people into my life and behaving in a certain way and picking people in relationships which were just destined to blow up on me, right? So you make a judgment about the past, about your past relationships, or maybe a revised judgment about the way things actually were. So, beliefs are just, every day, beliefs come in, you change beliefs, you revise them, some of them stick around for a while, new beliefs coming in, old beliefs going by the wayside. But what a belief is it's an assessment of the world such that you think certain things are instantiated in the world or are part of the world. And then you make judgments about certain other beliefs being false, maybe beliefs other people have. It's sort of weird, like you don't hold a belief that's false. Like you can understand a belief, but you don't, to say you hold a belief is say you hold something to be true. As soon as you say something's false, you disbelieve it, right? So if I say the belief God exists is false, that's another way of saying I don't believe in God. So the correspondence theory of truth just says that there's a difference between a belief and the truth, right? Just because you believe something doesn't mean it's true. And just because something's true doesn't necessarily mean you believe it. What might be an example of like something that might be true, but you might not believe it? Yeah, that's a little harder one. How about something you believe that might not be true? Well, no, all my beliefs are true. Well, okay, somebody else's beliefs, right? So if someone has a belief, for example, somebody might believe that, I think of a good example. I think of an example where I had a belief and it turned out to be false. We have to go way back. Okay, let's talk about my ex-wife. We were moving to New York, and she thought New York was like someplace in the middle of the country. I guess she wouldn't pay attention to geography. So she thought we were going someplace, and it's funny. She ended up in Denver. So, but she believed that New York State was someplace in the middle of the country. Turned out to be a false belief, right? I showed her on a map. Oh no, we're going way to the East Coast. So now, with ordinary things, like I gave the example of like my bank account, right? I have like $10 in this one account. I can move some money around, and I use it for gas, like my debit card. I use it for things. I'm like, I gotta put money in there. And I have to like go to the ATM and feed in $20 bills from my other account to avoid like being dinged with those stupid monthly fees. So anyway, I'm looking at this. I'm like, I got $10 in there. But and so this morning, I was getting some oatmeal, and it's like, oh, it's $1 or something like that. I'm like, oh, I can take $1. I still have $10 in there, so I swipe the card, and it turned out that it went through and everything's cool. But if I swipe the card and it gives me an error, I assume, oh well, I guess I forgot about something. I'm out of money, or maybe small percentage chance there's a bank error, right? But I know once I swipe the card, it's declined, that I don't have money in that account. Same thing with if you go up there with your credit card and you swipe it, and the clerk asks to see your card, and they pull out a pair of scissors and just snip it in two unceremoniously. Have you ever had that happen before? It's really embarrassing. Not that I'm necessarily speaking from personal experience, but they'll do that if you're like so if you just totally abuse your card and you haven't been paying it off and you try to buy something with it, they'll just cut that card right in half in front of you. Yeah, in front of everybody else too. People snicker behind you. So that there's a reason to revise your belief about how good your credit is, right? Or how much money you have left to spend. So people think, okay, yeah, I understand that. Maybe people make mistakes, but they don't insist that they have money in their account when somebody's cutting their card in two. But when it comes to things like God and morality and metaphysical issues, do I have a soul? All of a sudden people junk that theory and they come back to this, well, true for you. What's true for me might not be true for you. What's true for you might not be true for somebody else. Why is that? Any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Well, the other things are like visible truths
Mhm.
that you can see and like check up on, and everyone sees the same thing. But for like religion or like God or anything like that, it's not like seen or proven in a way, so it's less believable to everyone. So they're trying to like make up for the like inconsistency.
Yeah, I think people they're confusing truth with knowledge. It might be that you don't have any. Maybe that the issue with proof is a lot more difficult I'm assuming that you're correct that you can't prove that God exists or the soul exists or anything. That might be an assumption on your part. But at least it seems it's more difficult to prove God or the soul or free will, perhaps, than it's to prove whether you're overdrawn or not. Right? That's something where there's certain processes and procedures, and it's pretty easy to assess the evidence for that. And eventually, everybody's going to agree, hey, whether you have any money in that account or not. Chances are that it's not a bank error; it's a human error, financial error, user error. Yeah.
Well, there's also there's people I hold this true to myself, but you might not believe it. But that's also going with that. You're so set in stone with your belief, you're not going to convince someone else. But then there's people who do have their own personal beliefs, on either side of the spectrum. I believe in God, or no, there's no possible way we die and we're dead. And they're forced, maybe not forcing, well, sometimes forcing their beliefs on other people because that's what they find as a fact, as 100% fact. And I think everyone else should think the same way.
Well, what's the
So I
difference
feel
between a personal belief and just a belief? That's always wonder why people say, well, this is just my personal belief, but blah, 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 blah.
They don't have evidence to back it up.
Yeah, well, there's this guy, W.K. Clifford, who says, if you don't have time to investigate your belief to find sufficient evidence for it, you don't have any time to believe. But yeah, it seems like they're trying to sort of say, here's what I believe, but don't try to argue against me because I don't have any evidence for it, but I believe it anyway. Which I think is a pretty lousy way to form a belief. Why believe it? you think that you gotta have some reason for your beliefs, otherwise why would you believe them? If I said, I believe my favorite, like putting pieces of bologna in my tennis shoes will cure my athlete's foot, right? Why do you believe that? Oh no, I just thought it up on the spur of the moment. Well, did you read it in a medical journal? Did a friend tell you? It's no, I just thought I'd try it one time. Is your athlete's feet any better? No, but I'm going to give it a couple of weeks. Right. So why you got to have some reason for believing things. So, there's the correspondence theory of truth, which just says that truth is that which corresponds with reality, or a true statement is one which describes the world the way it actually is, and a false belief or a false statement describes the world in a way other than it is, fairly common sense. But then what is it people say, true for you, true for me? And I think it's what they're doing is they say that may be true for you, but it's not true for me. They're using truth in a non-standard way, and what they really mean to say is, well, that's what you believe, I believe something different. If that's really the case, then don't confuse, it seems like it confuses the matter to say, true for you, true for me. Just say, well, you believe that, I believe something different. Or how about this? I think your belief is false. I think you're wrong. Oh.
Yes.
And I think people, they really hesitate to tell somebody else they're wrong. And it's even hard to admit that something you believe is wrong or false. But if the world is otherwise, that's what it is. Now, maybe you want to be polite about it and not, bash somebody over the head saying, your belief is foolish, stupid, idiotic, dumb, stupid, and ridiculous. But you might say, well, I don't believe that. I think your belief is false. If someone says, Jeff, you need to accept the Lord Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. And I might say, thank you, but I'm an atheist or something, right? So that's just, you don't have to be mean or nasty about it or rude. You can just say, no, I don't think there is a God. I think that belief's false. And then you don't have to pile on and saying, every Sunday morning when you show up worshiping the invisible man in the sky, you're wasting your time. And you're going to end up in a pine box with everybody else. It's not, that's a matter of tact. But as far as truth, the statement God exists is no more relative than the statement I have $10 in my bank account. It's just there's different ways of verifying it, and verifying or proving those beliefs may be more difficult than the other. Comments, questions, disputations.
I was going to
Yeah.
say, you almost can't even say anything to another person's belief because we're all individual product of our environment. So everybody's belief or truth is a little bit different, just in a little way, even as real as it is.
I'm going to diplomatically disagree with you by saying that everybody's truth is a little different. Now, when you said everybody's belief is a little different, I think that's true. But just because everybody's belief in it is a little different doesn't mean everybody's truth is a little different, because there's not individual truths, there's just truth. Truth is the way the world is. Belief is the way you think it is. Maybe those two things match up, maybe they don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the way I think about it is truth is consistent, but the way you perceive the truth is how your beliefs are created.
Yeah, the way you, I suppose, assess the truth or try to figure out what's true. That can be different. But the truth is one determinate thing. The world is a certain way. Aristotle puts it this way. He says, what is. What is not, right? So there's the truth or the facts or the way the world is, and then there's everybody's beliefs about it. And just as one individual believing something doesn't make it true, a whole group of people believing a certain thing doesn't make it true either. It could be that everybody in the whole wide world is wrong about a certain belief. Assuming everybody in the world believes one thing, that thing could be wrong. Then how do you figure out what's true? Well, reason, logic, evidence. That's sort of what philosophy is all about. We'll talk about history of philosophy here forthwith. The relativist theory of truth says that whatever you believe is true for you, and there's no such thing as absolute truth. Is there anything wrong or maybe funny about the statement there's no such thing as absolute truth?
Wasn't that like Plato's view? Like on his apology, he said that like the only thing true he knew was that he didn't know.
Now, that's true. That's a claim about knowledge, though. It's not about truth. Plato is an absolutist with regard to truth. He's
Or not Plato, Socrates.
well. Plato was Socrates' student, and Socrates never wrote anything. Everything we know about well, not everything, but most of what we know about Socrates' philosophy comes through Plato. So often people use Plato and Socrates synonymously. But what Socrates says is that the only thing he really knows is that he doesn't know anything. But the idea of knowing, this goes back to my first question about skepticism and relativism. Skepticism says the truth is out there. It's absolute, unchanging, and it is what it is. And I don't know if I can figure out what it is. But it's out there. It just may be unknowable. It may be difficult to know. I think what Socrates / Plato would say is it's difficult to figure out what the truth is, but not impossible. But the truth exists. Whereas a relativist, there's actually a dialogue called the Protagoras, where Socrates is arguing with this guy Protagoras, who's a relativist. And Protagoras says, the truth is what appears, and what appears to each man is different. And so truth is just appearance, or what seems to be. And so he has this relativist view that whatever I believe is true for me. And they argue back and forth, and Socrates takes him to task for this belief. But think about what if someone says there is no absolute truth. What is there anything kind of strange about that kind of statement, or questionable, contradictory maybe?
It's saying that there's no absolute truth, but it's implying that that is the truth.
Yeah, when you make a declarative statement, the cat is on the mat. What am I telling you? I'm telling you the cat is on the mat is true, right? If I say this cup contains the delicious nectar of great value pink mango energy drink, right? And is a World of Warcraft cup, right? And turn around, World of Warcraft, right? Then I'm telling you those things are true about this cup and its contents. I'm making a claim. When someone makes a declarative statement, there is no absolute truth. They're making a declarative statement about the world, right? And they're saying, here's something that's true about the world. There is no absolute truth. And they're saying something that's true about the world, absolutely. So, another translation of that might be, I'm telling you it's absolutely true, there's no absolute truth. And it seems like it's contradictory in the face. It would be like, I am not now speaking. No words are coming out of my mouth. I am completely silent at this very moment. My vocal cords are emitting no sound whatsoever. So this I just uttered like 5 contradictions in the space of 10 seconds. The relativist is doing the same thing. When they claim there's no such thing as absolute truth, they're assuming the correspondence theory of truth, and then they're trying to convince you that something is true absolutely, namely there's no such thing as absolute truth. Lunacy, complete lunacy. It's amazing that such things are academically respectable, and people that believe such things aren't sent for mental evaluations. But maybe I'm mistaken. Am I being dogmatic again? And stop me if I am. So, what are some reasons to believe in relativism? Why would anybody say people have different truths? Maybe help me understand this. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of a cop-out way. You can get away with a lot more stuff believing that in ethics, I think. But
Yeah, you make a good point that in areas of personal taste, we recognize that people have different personal taste. And people even, maybe we might even say people have different value systems. Like I value, my personal taste includes like very sweet, tangy drinks. My brother likes sour whiskey, right? And which I disdain. So we have different personal tastes, and different value systems. Like I believe in having a job that I think is meaningful and makes a contribution to the world, and it's fun on top of that. And my brother is an accountant for the government, right? So the two-time loser. So no, accounting is a fine profession. But he has a different value system than I do, and we have different things about personal areas of personal morality. We have disagreements there, and sometimes you might say, well, people value different things, so certain things might be right or wrong according to their value system. It's we talk about this in the ethics class, and it has an air of plausibility. But when you deal with like the earth revolves around the sun, or how much money I have in my bank account, or anything that exists in the world, even whether there's a God or not, it seems like, how could that be relative? That doesn't seem to be a matter of personal taste or preference. It doesn't seem to be a matter of like how much you care about things, or your value system, or a set of principles that you've adopted. It has to do with reality, right? What exists independent of your mind. Yeah.
So my question is like, where do you separate ignorance from relativism? So like, I think a bunch of evangelists are saying the world is 13,000 years old, and I mean, obviously scientists contradict that. So where does that line get drawn? Because I feel like that's a matter of subjection, right? Isn't that like
Yeah.
the perception that they have? So.
Right. So some people believe, people believe that the Earth is 13,000 years old, or there's even some flat earthers. I was skeptical about that, and then a trusted friend told me, no, I ran into this guy, and he really did think that, and he tried to give me some scientific arguments for the Earth being flat.
It's with the holographic.
But it's, how many people really believe that? It's just, you have to be like, I'm sure there's a million times more Scientologists, or it's just a small fringe group with an internet site, and people that dig it. A lot of them are probably think it's just so hilariously funny that they'll push the theory just to outrage their friends. But people do believe things like the young Earth theory, or that we never went to the moon, that the Apollo moon landings were all a hoax, and things like that. So it's the correspondence theory of truth would say there is a truth about whether we went to the moon, about how old the Earth is, and then what you do to try to figure out what that truth is you present evidence. And so you have two contrary views. One person presents one side, the other person presents the other side, and you argue back and forth in a sort of adversarial way. Or maybe you could just sort of have a discussion and present different points of view. Socrates really likes the adversarial thing. He has this thing where he gets his friends together and says, okay, Thrasymachus, you be devil's advocate, or Glaucon, I want you to try to prove that justice sucks and injustice is where it's at, and I'm going to think that justice is awesome and injustice is bad, and let's have an argument. So he likes this sort of back and forth argumentation style, and you see this in the Apology. But the idea is that there's a truth that everybody wants to believe, and then you argue back and forth about what that truth is. But it's not as if just because you believe something, it's true. What you're arguing about is the way the world is. You each have a subjective understanding of what that truth is, and provide objective reasoning which supports your position. And then this is what academia is all about, really, too, is trying to understand the world, trying to study it, comprehend it. And then, what do people do? Well, they publish papers where they make arguments for, all kinds of things, right? In the social sciences, about economics, about sociology, about anthropology, right? This is all about people presenting arguments for and against different views. So this is what we do in philosophy too. And philosophy is kind of the first academic discipline, and starts with Socrates. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. Anything else on the correspondence theory of truth? Let me look at these questions. So the relativist says truth is just belief. And think about how silly that is, right? So how do you figure out what's true about the world? Well, just like peer into your own soul and see what's there, right? See what, or to put it maybe more, accurately, see, look inside your empty set head and see what's rattling around in there. Oh, whatever that is, it's going to be true, right? Do you have to like study, research, investigate, argue, agonize, stare at the ceiling, wondering what the truth about God, the universe, and everything is? No, you just like look into whatever you happen to believe when you wake up in the morning. That's true for you. It seems really lazy and narcissistic to me. The skeptic, on the other hand, says the truth's out there. It's just sort of hard to get. The truth plays hard to get. I think that'd be a great slogan. I think I'll put it on a T-shirt. Maybe I'll attribute to Socrates and put a picture of him and send it off as a meme and see how many people like it on the Facebook. Yeah, watch out for those apocryphal quotes floating around the internets. We talked about this being, so it's contradictory to say there's no such thing as absolute truth. And a contradiction can't be true. If whatever you believe is true for you, how could you ever have a false belief? Well, you couldn't, right? But surely you've had at least one false belief in your life. Okay, well then you shouldn't be a relativist. We create our own reality. I'll leave that for another time. You can create your own reality in a certain sense, right? You can do certain things in the real world which bring about certain consequences. You can go to school, study, get decent grades, get your degree, and that will help you, get your dream job, maybe. Right? So you're creating your own reality in a certain respect, or you're gonna dump that loser and get into a healthy relationship. And maybe you're going to start going to the gym and lose some weight or whatever, right? You're creating your own reality in that respect, but you can't create your own reality through magic, juju, and kind of like sending out vibrations to the universe or whatever. At least I like to see evidence of that, because that seems like it'd be a great shortcut if I could just get in the lotus position and meditate and just like drop pound after pound without going to the gym. That would be awesome, but I don't think it's possible. Okay. Same deal about world peace. I don't think people chanting and doing whatever, chanting and praying to whatever God is going to bring about peace in the Middle East. Okay, let's talk about a bit about philosophy. Oh, we have been talking about philosophy. Let's talk about the history of philosophy. Any last questions on truth, correspondence theory, theory of truth, relativism? Okay, so I want to hear true for you, true for me. Last chance to make an argument for true for you, true for me. When you're with friends, pass around the funny cigarette. No special card required. You can talk about true for you, true for me. This is a reputable academic course where we're talking about objective reality. Okay. Oh, I already had this thing out.
You might want to reconsider the blue text.
The blue? What? Oh.
Kind of hard for you to be clear.
Is it? Oh, sorry about that. Well, it'll be. Why is it only the new one is white? Okay, let me. The first midterms were 30%, and the other two were 35%. I wish it would all be white. Oh, hey, be careful about talking about whiteness too much here. Get in trouble. With it, all this text would be white. I'm not making any statements about race here.
You had the boycott of Star Wars failed.
You had a friend that wanted me to boycott it, and I had a commitment for a movie date, so and I'd already made it. This person didn't like the way they were. Disney was going after some person putting a picture of the new action figures on their website. I was thinking, what a bunch of idiots! It's like free marketing. Why would you do that and take off your fans? All right. So, what was there before philosophy? Darkness, ignorance, human depravity. Well, what do you have? Well, you had religion. I didn't mean to connect those last two sentences, the last sentence with this one. But you had religion. So in order to figure out, like, understand the world, people told stories about the gods. Where did those stories come from? Well, they get passed down from generation to generation. How they get started, I guess that's the subject for an anthropology class. But people trying to understand the naturalistic world, one theory is to have a sense of control over the world, you have a need to attribute agency to impersonal forces of nature. So you can see, like, gorillas, when there's a big thunderstorm, they'll pound their fists on their chests to try to scare away the evil sound. It's like my now deceased beloved pug, Mr. Peppy. When the evil garbage truck came around the corner, you hear this terrible sound going along the fence. And you run out there and run along the fence, back and forth, bark, 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 and every time he scared it away, right? And so, and then you could see, okay, well, you have some scary sound that's, and flashes of light. And so what do? Well, there's a couple of things you could do. You could kind of puff out your chest and try to scare away the evil thing, right? That's sort of my dog's strategy. And then maybe if you're a shaman, you could put on like a big scary mask and grab a rattle and make a lot of racket and make yourself look big and scary and try to scare away the evil thing that's causing the ground to shake or causing somebody in your tribe to sweat and throw up all night or what have you, right? Earthquakes, thunderstorms, all those disease, all those scary things, and you get some sense of control over them. And so, how did the world get here? Well, once upon a time, the gods, created the heavens and the earth. So you have these stories that explain how everything got here. Why do human beings love the taste of meat, right? You get a story, and the ancient Greeks actually had a story about that. Prometheus stole fire from the gods. Like, how did human beings discover fire? Well, there's this guy named Prometheus, and he stole the power of creating fire and brought it down and showed human beings how to kill animals and cook their meat. So you tell these stories about the gods, and it explains things. Also, there's cultural traditions that are separate from religion. So, how do we do things? Well, we do things the way the ancestors did them. Why? Because that's the way it's always been done. And so you have marriage customs, you have, what you can eat, what you should wear, how to deal with your fellow human beings.
Is it ethos, not ethnos?
Actually, ethnos has to do with culture. Ethos is, let's see, I'm going to switch back and forth here. Ethos has to do with both culture and values. This is the term ethnic we get, ethnic studies, right? It has to do with culture. I think ethos is more having to do with ethics or value, which is a little different, and that's actually more proper to philosophy. So you have a culture, another influence, not necessarily drawn from religion, but usually like interwoven with culture, and oftentimes customs about marriage and sex and who you can have sex with and who you can't, and how you relate to other people, government, all the ways that people deal with one another are sort of laid out in terms of these cultural traditions. You pass down from generation to generation how to conduct yourself, what's important, what's not, how to live. And so you had this group called the, let's see, and actually, let's, before we get to the natural philosopher, let's just take our break. So let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back about 2 o'clock by that clock. Anybody not sign the roll sheet? Coming late? Oh yeah, you guys. So who do we have out there in the grove? Where's my pen? So we were talking about what was there before philosophy. Well, people tried to understand the world through religion and through culture. And philosophy is something different than both religion and culture. Religion tries to answer things in terms of stories about the gods, appealing to supernatural agencies and forces. And then culture just refers to the way people developed different strategies for dealing with the world, dealing with other people. And these are things that sort of emerge organically when people live in groups. That through trial and error, they learn how to do things a certain way. They develop certain beliefs about the world, and they just pass them down from generation to generation. And both these things have their pitfalls. I suppose one thing is that once something gets approved as a story about the gods or as divine revelation, it's really hard to revise it, right? If that's the word, if this is the word of God or the truth about the universe and the cosmos from some authority written in some old book, if it turns out that somebody was mistaken, maybe they weren't hearing from God just right, or maybe they got God confused with something like xenophobia or prejudice, and they attribute it to this supernatural being. It's really hard to get rid of that. And you have issues with gender equality and stuff. A lot of that is caught up with these ancient traditions. And people keep on pointing to this old book, even when we have space flight. People are looking at these old books saying, this is the way it is. And it's very hard to get people to change their minds about that sort of thing. The same thing about culture. People just reflexively follow these cultural traditions, even if they don't understand where they come from or why they're doing it. There's a story, I'm not sure where this came from originally. A story about this woman who's would always cut the ends off the roast when she made a roast. And at one point, her husband asked her, like, well, why do you always cut the ends off the roast? That looks like it's perfectly good meat. Why aren't we eating that? And she said, I don't know, that's the way my mother always did it. And so he says, well, why don't you ask your mom? And she asked her mom, and her mom says, oh, that was because we had this really like small baking pan, and the roast wouldn't fit in it, so you had to cut the ends off. And I just throw them away because we had a decent amount of money, and it's just I needed to fit it into the pan, right? So often these cultural traditions are like that. Like taboos against eating certain foods, for example, like pork, where you can get trichinosis in the pre-refrigeration days, or shellfish. Often people have a shellfish allergy. Somebody, their windpipe closes up and they almost die, or maybe do die. They keel over and like, oh, stay away from that stuff. That's going to kill you, right? And then it gets passed down from in the generations. So not always a reliable way of understanding the world and having true beliefs. You think about, well, why do I believe this? Well, everybody else believes this. Well, again, majority belief doesn't mean it's true. And how do you know somebody way back when didn't get things wrong, either when they're writing down your sacred traditions and sacred history, or coming up with these cultural rules that everybody's following? So along come the natural philosophers, otherwise known as the pre-Socratics. And they're called the pre-Socratics because they're the guys. Could you keep that moving around? That's a TV release, by the way. So everybody,
No, there's only a few on there.
There's one right here.
how many? It looks like there are nearly enough names on there compared with the number of.
There's one right here.
Oh, there's
One's
two?
a release, one's a attendance.
No, the attendance is here. Yeah, these are both releases. So you only need to sign one of those. I think he circulated two just because there might not be space on one. So just sign one of those. If you sign two, it's fine. But I just want to make sure everybody signs. This is it's a release that, again, the first day I told you, the college reserves the right to use your image and words for educational purposes, not financial purposes. All right. Or any other purpose. I'm not sure what other purposes there are. So the natural philosophers, or the pre-Socratics, they're called the pre-Socratics because they're the guys that came before Socrates, who's the father of philosophy. These guys are sort of, they're not philosophers in the truest sense, even though they're called philosophers. They're called natural philosophers. And before the word science was used, people would use the term natural philosophy to refer to science. So Galileo was doing natural philosophy, astronomy. I suppose, you look at the early guys, Francis Bacon doing natural philosophy. And so it's only until later we have this term science being used for natural philosophy. But these are really guys who are doing something like primitive science. They're sort of proto-scientists. And what they're looking for is rational explanations for the workings of nature. So they want to understand why, like a big thing was like weather. What causes the weather? Why was there freezing rain and black ice last week? And why is it warmer now? And why does it always get cold in the wintertime and warm in the summertime on the northern hemisphere? Go down to Latin America or Australia, it's the reverse. That's why Tim Minchin has this song about Christmas. It's called White Wine in the Sun. And the whole deal is like he's thinking about like sitting in the sun drinking wine, and you think, well, but it's Christmas time. It should be about like snowmen and sleigh rides and stuff. Well, not in Australia. In Australia, it's summertime in December. Yes.
Can you just do the last slide and stay in 2 seconds?
Yeah. So the natural philosophers are looking for rational explanations, as opposed to old stories, texts, references to the traditions of the elders. The idea is, okay, those are all nice, and it's nice to be multi-culti and sort of and have all these stories about our traditions and about the forefathers and yada yada. But what's really the case? How does this stuff really work? And so, explanation for the seasons, you have before the pre-Socratic philosophers or the natural philosophers, you have this question of why does the seasons change? And you have a myth, a story about the gods. In this case, a myth of Persephone. Not Persephone, by the way, Persephone. It's a Greek word. Right, so why do the seasons change? We have a story about the gods. In this case, Persephone is kidnapped by the god Hades, who's the god of the underworld. So there's no Match.com at this time. Hades couldn't get on the OkCupid, and so he's like, okay, well, I got to find myself a wife. She looks good, and just like swoops through in his chariot and grabs her and heads down to his palace in the underworld. And this is Altair, and you can see there's where's my mouse? I lost my mouse. It's not working. We have to use the arrows here. But you can see if I can get my maybe something stuck. Use my pen. There we go. So you can see there's Hades and there's Persephone. He's grabbing her, and I think this is someplace around it. I think this is maybe her handmaid or something like that. And maybe one of these is his mother, Demeter, the Earth Mother. So statuary by Bernini, same deal. She's not too keen on the idea. Right. So here's actually an older Greek I don't know what you call it. I guess it's a painting in a vase. And there's here she looks like she's more resigned to her fate, and she's not struggling and trying to get away. Here's a bas relief, old timey, probably even more closer to when this myth emerged. Hoisting her into his chariot there. Here's a more modern lithograph. It's Hades peeling out in his chariot. This is done in the 20s. Persephone looks kind of like a flapper in this picture. So, so he takes her to the underworld and makes her his wife. And then what happens? Well, Persephone's mother is Demeter, the earth goddess. And so what happens is Demeter gets very sad and she falls into a deep depression. And she's in charge of making stuff grow. And so what happens is when Demeter's depressed, she neglects her work. Crops don't grow, the earth grows cold, and the ground gets hard, and plants don't spring up anymore. And Demeter cries tears for her daughter. And those tears are, the rain that's falling from the sky 9 months out of the year. I heard a couple of students in the cafeteria, one of them was grousing about how there's only 2 seasons in Eugene. It's like summer and winter. And
Don't
so,
get road construction.
oh, road construction, that's summer. Maybe road construction, it's kind of year round, I guess. But Demeter neglects her work, and the plants die, nothing's grow, her tears fill the earth. And so finally Zeus has to intervene. He's the king of the gods. And, Zeus, the consummate politician, decides to, find out what the 2 sides want and go right down the middle. So he says, okay, here's what we're going to do. Demeter, you want to be with your daughter. Hades, you want to be with your new wife. I'm going to I'm going to ignore the fact that you just sort of went down and kidnapped her, and this isn't a consensual arrangement at all. But he says, here's how it's going to be. You get to spend part of the year with your mother, and you have to spend part of the year with your husband. And so, there's a variant that involves some magic pomegranate seeds that she eats. But the basic idea is that part of the year where the Earth Mother's daughter is with her, it's summer, and things grow, or spring and summer. Things grow out of the earth. It's warm and pleasant, and there's no rain, or very little. And then in the months where Persephone's down with her husband Hades, Demeter's sad, and it gets cold and dark, and stuff doesn't grow. So you think about, that's a nice story, but is that really how it is? And you had at the time, you had this high material culture and the rise of an intellectual class in ancient Greece, and you had people saying, yeah, that's a nice story to recite at the big festivals, and maybe tell your kids when you're tucking them into bed at night, or when they ask you, Mommy, Daddy, why do the seasons turn? And you tell them the story. But that's, an educated person can't really believe this. So you have this guy Anaximander, and he's again looking for a rational explanation. So he says, no, I'm not going to tell you a story about the gods. I'm going to give you a story about natural impersonal forces which vie for control over the earth. And he talks about a cold and a wet force versus a hot and a dry force. And these forces are at odds with each other, and they're constantly seeking equilibrium. Now, as it turns out, this isn't the real story. But can you see how this is better than a story about a kidnapped goddess? Right? He has this idea that there are these fundamental forces of nature, and what happens is that one sort of becomes predominant over the other, and then it throws things out of balance, and then it causes the other force to be stronger, and then things bounce the other way, but they sort of overcorrect, and they're always seeking an equilibrium between the two forces. And so it's this constant swing from one side to the other, like, the political spectrum, right? 8 years of George W. Bush, 8 years of Obama, right? And maybe it'll be 8 years of Trump, and then maybe it'll be 8 years of, I suppose Sanders will kick off by then. But whoever's to the left of President Obama and is still around. I don't know who the up-and-coming leftists are. Think of somebody who'd be young enough. She'll be long gone. I'm sure or maybe Hillary Clinton, right? So 8 years of Clinton. And then it'll go back to the other side, right? But you get this swing back and forth in politics people say, yeah, we want like a left-wing president. And then after 8 years, you're like, oh God, I want to change. I want something different. And then you get the right-wing guy. And then people say, oh, this is a disaster. Let's get a left-wing guy in there. Right? This is sort of back and forth. He thinks the same thing happens with the forces of nature. Or you think about like a bucket, right? You take the bucket and you kind of like slosh it back and forth and see the water goes, right? It's back and forth. So you can see these things in nature, and you can see that nature looks to equalize things. And so you can see this idea of forces in equilibrium. It's a pretty sophisticated concept. And so a step in the right direction. Again, that's not actually the way it is. Anybody know why we have the season, by the way? Like why, generally speaking?
The North and the South Pole.
Yeah, it's a
It
tilted.
flips every 26,000 years and every.
Oh, the seasons change faster than that.
Yeah.
But it's the
Cycle.
the tilt of the Earth that you mentioned on its axis. It spins on its axis, and actually it's the tilt of the Earth on its axis, and then it spins around as it's going, and it's also going around the sun. So at different times of the year, different parts of the Earth are exposed to it, right? So you get the revolution that spinning on the top. That's what creates our days. But then if it's sort of tilted at this angle, you can see like the parts of the Earth that are exposed, and the angle the sun hits this way is going to be different than if it's around this way, right? There's a different part. This part's exposed as opposed to this part. So not factually correct, but again, in the right direction. The Greeks figured out that the Earth is they figured out the circumference of the Earth. They figured out, I think, about how far it is from the sun. They figured out that it revolved around the sun and spin like a top, or at least some of the Greeks, believed that. Unfortunately, Aristotle got it wrong, and then that's sort of what went to the Middle Ages. What passed for philosophy in the Middle Ages was Aristotle and the Bible, basically. So, but the Greeks figured out a lot of this stuff. And it was these natural philosophers who figured out stuff that was only rediscovered later on in the Renaissance when people found these ancient Greek scientific texts. And maybe a few things like telescopes helped too, right? So it's the right kind of explanation, right? So even if it doesn't get things factually right, people are looking for a rational explanation. They're not looking at an old book. They're not asking what the ancestors have always believed. They're not consulting cultural tradition. They're not asking some person hopped up on natural gas seeps who's speaking for the god Apollo or something. They're making observations and trying to come up with a theory, which is the best explanation for those observations, and using known principles of natural change that they observe around them. Anaximander. Anaximander is an interesting guy. He came up with a primitive form of evolutionary theory. He had this idea that human beings used to have a tail and swim around and in the ocean, and I think he had this idea by looking at human beings after birth are like they have one of the longest periods of being defenseless. And he thought, you look at fish, they just hatch from the eggs and they start swimming around and eating immediately. And he thought if human beings were always like this, they just never would have survived. So maybe they evolved from these more primitive forms of life in the sea. And some of these people, we just get fragments. We don't get long explanations. And then we hear about them through other people. So this is just part of this is conjecture. But he did have this idea that human beings evolved from sea life, or originally were sea creatures. Again, not exactly right, but he's on the right track. Theories based on observations and rational inference are always better than theories based on, again, old books from previous superstitious eras and so on. So it's a theory based on observation and rational inference. Anybody still writing? It's a long sentence. Theories based on observation and rational inference. That's basically what science is. Okay? And the scientific method didn't really come around until Francis Bacon, I guess, in the 17th century. So it's a lot later. But even before that, these guys are doing something like science. See, Aristotle's doing something like science, where he's making observations and trying to come up with a theory based on those observations, based on logic and reason, and not just based on authority or based on superstition. Okay. My mouse did again. Let's try this. Democritus. There we go. Democritus is the father of atomism, this idea that the earth, everything around us is made up of these tiny, unsplittable particles. So the word atom comes from the Greek word atomos, which just means unsplittable. The A means not. The tomos has to be being dividable or divided or split. So an atom is the idea of a fundamental particle that makes up everything. And he had this idea that everything that exists is made up of these tiny little particles. And he thought they're different kinds and shapes and so on. So they're not like all like sort of billiard balls or something. So he has this concept that there are different kinds of atoms. And it's the way atoms are collected together can explain all the kinds of changes we see in the world. And he's also the first materialist. So he says, even if they're gods, they're made out of atoms too. He has a theory of, there's also this idea of the mechanistic worldview, that these atoms move around through cause and effect, and that any change we can see is a result of these atoms bumping together, splitting apart, hooking together. There's some atoms he thought that had sort of like hooks like, briars, or sort of like you see in Velcro. They kind of get stuck together. So they have different properties, and there's this idea of a fundamental particle that makes that and it's too small even to see with the human eye, that makes up all the objects we see today. It's vaguely in general it's pretty much the way things are, right? It turns out that what we call atoms today can actually be split, and things get really complicated. You get quantum physics, and right there's a lot more to the picture. But basically, Democritus came up with this some really fundamentally important things. This idea of fundamental elementary particles, of the world being made of matter, and there not being any sort of spiritual stuff, and things working through natural mechanical forces, which is pretty much the way scientists see the world today. He also saw this element of probability in nature, which is also part of kind of the new physics, quantum physics. He had a theory of free will. He thought that every once in a while, for no particular reason, an atom in your brain might swerve in some random direction, and that is what accounted for free will. So he said, there's this. You're not like a robot. Your brain does operate according to these mechanical principles, but there's a little element of probability, and atoms aren't always predictable, and sometimes they just go off in one direction as opposed to the other for no particular reason, and that makes room for free will. Later on, you get Karl Popper, the famous philosopher and philosopher of science, has a similar view using quantum mechanics and Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty, but the same basic idea. And we'll talk about free will later on, and how probability fits into the idea of free will. Anaxagoras. Anaxagoras is quoted actually in the Apology, and he says, "The sun is a rock and the earth a moon." Well, what did he mean by that? Well, people at the time thought the sun was a god, and they worshipped it, Helios. They thought the moon was a god too, and they worshipped it. Anaxagoras says, well, look, the sun, it's like the earth, but it's on fire. It's a big burning rock. And the moon is just an earth without a bunch of stuff growing on it. It's sort of like a barren rock. The earth is a rock with a bunch of stuff growing on it and people living on it. And it's all the same fundamental stuff. And this idea of everything fundamentally in the universe being made of the same stuff, again, is like a really important concept. It makes science possible, makes astronomy possible, and it goes back to Anaxagoras. Anaxagoras got into a lot of hot water because religious people thought he was trying to destroy their faith in the gods. Although he was also like a really famous scientist, and so he had a lot of fame and supporters as well. So his idea is celestial bodies that we see, the big glowing stuff up in the sky. It's not supernatural, it's not divine, it's part of the natural world. And you know, the things up there in the sky, those are made of the same thing that things on the earth are made of. Again, these are things that we regard as true now, and for the most part, I guess. And there might be some sun worshippers out there, out in some undeveloped country or something. I don't know. Neo-paganism is making a rise. We're going to do just talking with John Seidel, teaches religion. We're going to do an interfaith panel on a new religious move, the new spirituality. I think we're going to have somebody talking about neo-paganism. So the Greeks are back, along with the Norse mythology and all the, I guess, the Romans. The Norse and the Wiccan thing is really big, especially in Eugene. It was very bohemian. But it's going to be the new spirituality, neo-paganism, mysticism, and syncretism, which is sort of the idea of mixing and matching beliefs, and then the new atheism. So it should be an interesting thing. I think we'll probably do that end of this term or maybe beginning of spring term.
The new atheism?
The new atheism, yeah, which is a sort of new, they call it the new atheism. It's sort of like you get these kind of firebrand atheists who are sort of pushing a naturalistic worldview. Mostly scientists, some philosophers. Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, Michael Shermer, some of these guys are, and these are, I suppose, people that instead of being defensive are sort of going on the offense and trying to spread the virtues of naturalism and not believing in God or supernatural agencies, and making it hip to be an atheist once again.
Hasn't that how it's been for atheists for what seems like forever? And atheists, that's like a typical joke all the time. Like how do you know that someone in the bar is an atheist? Because they'll tell you that they're an atheist. Or like the same thing with religion.
It's interesting. There's they've done these studies that show that you sort of rate people as being like undesirable. That there's more prejudice against atheists than even against any racial minority. Like you have ask people, what do you think about these people? And they mention like people of different races and even gay people, right? So you have people that are historically been discriminated against, racial minorities, the LGBT community, and then at the very rock bottom, the people that everybody hates, atheists. So interesting. So Anaxagoras, it seems like probably an atheist. So that's the natural philosophers. Again, the first scientists who paved the way for philosophy. That'll be like one of the first questions. Like the natural philosophers were, the first scientists in scare quotes who paved the way for philosophy. So then you have the sophists. Sophist literally means wise man, but wise men. But in actually modern language and back then it meant something a little different. The sophists were teachers of argument and rhetoric for a fee. And Socrates interestingly defends himself and says, "I'm not a sophist," and his reason is I never charged people for my teaching. And what the sophists would do is they get students and they teach you how to win in court, how to sue your neighbor, how to fool people into voting for you and become a politician, how to get off on the beat the rap and avoid prosecution or conviction. Yeah, lawyers, basically lawyers. Like people probably in ancient Greece, they'd say, what do you call 1,000 sophists at the bottom of the Mediterranean? A good start. Right, so that's they have the same reputation as lawyers do today. And they, part of their profession did include legal things. They are also kind of like the Tony Robbins and Dale Carnegie's of their day, where they sort of taught people how to get more out of life and be successful. Well, a lot of that had to do with beating the rap, making a bunch of money, fooling people into voting for you, winning friends, influencing people, manipulating people to do your bidding. So they ran the gambit from guys that seemed to be, pretty with it and positive to basically hired guns who would teach, they would teach you how to win even if you were obviously guilty. I'm thinking about it. See, pick on someone, Yeah, Johnny Cochran or Dick Moore. Yeah, I'm Bill Cosby as a lawyer, right? So that doesn't look good for him. So, there'd be if Bill Cosby got into the trouble he did in ancient Greece, there'd be a line of sophists waiting to take his case as long as he paid their fee, which was usually substantial, especially for the really good ones. So they had a reputation like that, enjoyed by lawyers today for trickery, subterfuge, low morals, opportunism. You see this with political consultants today, like David Gergen, right? He's still on those panels on CNN or MSNBC or wherever, and he advised Reagan and he advised Clinton. You see Dick Morris used to be a Clinton advisor, now he's a conservative. And you see people sort of switch sides based on which way the wind's blowing or where their political fortunes seem to be headed. And they don't care who wins or loses. Well, they care that their candidate does. But they don't think in terms of, this is the correct way to do things or this is the best way to do things. They think this is the guy that's paying me and I'm going to support his cause and give him the best chance of winning. So here's what their reputation was, that they made the weaker argument defeat the stronger. So this example is so dated now, I'm sure. Let's see. Do a little math in my head here. 94, 2004, 10. I'm sure there's some people in here that weren't born before OJ or were in diapers or something. But Johnny Cochran, if it doesn't fit, you must have quit, right? With the bloody glove that didn't fit. You can think of whatever case the outrages that outraged you with the verdict, high profile case. Who was that woman that was accused of killing her roommate in Italy? It was a big high profile case.
Oh, that was a weird one. I read about that.
Yeah. She seems just so obviously guilty, and the idea that she's not in prison now is scandalous. But so you have a fancy pants lawyer, though. He can help you beat the rap, and that's what the sophists had, this opportunity of being these sleazebags who would use verbal trickery to pull the wool over the jury, to pull the wool over the public's eyes, and to get you elected, to help you beat the rap, to help you win a lawsuit, and so on and so forth. And Athens, the city-state of Athens in ancient Greece, was just obsessed with politics, lawsuits, trials. As just the center of their world was political and legal. Much like America today. A lot of the rest of the world looks at America as being kind of nuts with our obsession, not necessarily with politics, but with law and the number of lawyers we have in this country. There's a funny there's a play by this guy named Aristophanes called The Wasps, and it concerns this old guy. He's living with his family. He's the father of the family, and he's obsessed. He's like the guy who's would watch all the OJ trial, or today has it on court TV 24/7, and all he wants to do is go and stand in line to be a juror, and to stand in the box and hear the prosecution, and then hear the defense, and then give the thumbs up or the thumbs down, or get to vote, get to vote and decide life and death over the defendant. It's his I think it's his daughter or his wife tries to sort of keep him like a prisoner in his own home. So because he's sort of obsessed with the courtroom. But it's a joke because that was like your average Greek. They were obsessed with legal proceedings. So the sophists, you can see they did really well there. So here's what Socrates did. He combined the sophists' argumentation methods with this idea of theory building of the natural philosophers. So the natural philosophers have this idea that I'm going to have this theory about the world. I'm going to use observation and I'm going to use rigorous logical reasoning to try to figure out the truth about the world. And then you have the sophists that say, I don't really care about the truth, but I got these great arguments and these great rhetorical techniques. I'm going to use those to try to convince somebody of the truth. And Socrates says, well, I want to find out what's the truth about the world. So what I'm going to do is I'll get together a bunch of my friends. We're going to leave the rhetoric aside, and we're just going to use those logical argumentations. And I'm going to be one side, like the prosecutor, and somebody else is going to be the other side, like the defense. And we're going to duke it out, verbally, and let the truth come out the same thing it would in a way it would in a courtroom. And then I'm going to try to build a theory of not just like the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the earth, and the nature of weather, but I want to understand things like the nature of virtue, the nature of truth itself, the nature of the soul, the truth about life after death, all those things that people wonder about. And I'm going to come up with theories about those things. But they're not going to be based on stories about the gods or cultural traditions. They're going to be based on pure logic and reason. And hence, philosophy is born. So this is why Socrates is really the first guy or maybe the most famous guy to start doing this sort of thing, to come up with something that's completely new. Yeah.
I was going to say, you'd think a lot of the problems in the Western world is because we latched on to Western philosophy. I was wondering, do you talk about much about the Tao, or would you consider like Eastern teachings of the Tao philosophy?
That's a good question. We cover Taoism in our religion classes, and part of that, I suppose, is historical. Part of it's the way things were done when I got here, tradition, right? Well, it's a great example of tradition, right? Why is it philosophy 203? Well, it's because whoever created it, decided to do that. I think maybe somebody thought ethics was the easiest, so you start with that. And then you have the 202, which is knowledge, and then you do the reality one. But there's, as far as really good reasons for having it that way, not really. But going back to the Taoism thing, that's taught in the let's see, philosophy 202. We talk about Taoism, and that's more, Taoism. It's a philosophy of nature, but it's also predominantly a spiritual belief. Like the concept of the Tao is a mystical concept. So
in no way it was Confucius kind of a natural philosopher?
Confucius is more of a philosopher, I would say. Confucius actually is, I would say, he's sort of a political philosopher with a kind of a deistic concept of a high god. But yeah, even though he's Eastern, Confucius's philosophy sounds very Western, but he's also dealt with, because it's part of the religion of Asia, he's also in the 202 class in religion. And part of that is just, philosophy, because the Western tradition is so influential, the class will be mostly talking about Western philosophy, although we're going to be talking about some sort of religious concept. So we'll be talking about life after death, and we'll be talking about reincarnation, Buddhism, and Hinduism, but not Taoism, Confucianism. Maybe if I taught a class in political philosophy, I'd include, or in social philosophy, I'd include Confucius. Maybe I should do something like that. We're doing the philosophy 205. Maybe I'll do something on Confucian social philosophy. Okay. Father of philosophy, again, philosophy as this sort of idea of trying to understand the world through the systematic application of reason. That's really what philosophy is. Well, that'll be the first question on the exam, by the way. Definition of philosophy. What is philosophy? Well, literally the love of wisdom. But systematically, it's, or more rigorously, It's an attempt to understand the world through the use of reason, as opposed to subjective spiritual experiences or authority or tradition. It's an attempt to understand the world purely through the use of reason and logic. I probably should have had that up in one of my quotes. It's in the book. It's like, I think it's like the first sentence and the second sentence in the book, something like that. So, so Socrates wanted to understand the world as a whole, not just astronomy, biology, physics, etc. He's really interested in the nature of virtue and knowledge. And what is it that makes a good person as opposed to a bad person? What is virtue? And what is knowledge? And what's truth? And how are they related? Those are, like, you can see those are different than what's the nature of the moon, or why do the stars shine at night, or why is it so cold in the wintertime and hot in the summertime? What causes that? Why are the different kinds of rocks, and where do they come from? Or you can think of all the stuff in biology. Why do some animals eat other animals and other animals eat plants? And could a person live with just eating plants? Like those sorts of questions are biological. Where do frogs come from? Aristotle famously thought that frogs were spontaneously generated from the mud. To show even great minds can make stupid mistakes, right? He saw the frogs emerging from the mud, not realizing that if he would have observed a little more carefully, he would have saw that the frogs laid their eggs there, and then the eggs hatched and they came up through the mud. But so you get the doctrine of spontaneous generation. Okay, so Socrates is really interested in more philosophical things. Again, virtue and knowledge, the nature of the soul, life after death, those sorts of things. Politics also, justice. Socrates is put on trial as an old man by these three ambitious younger men. You got Antaeus, Meletus, and Lycon. And Meletus seems to be sort of the ringleader. We don't know much about him, except for apparently he has a big nose, or at least Socrates says he does. Right. One thing to consider is we're just getting Socrates' side of the story. And actually, one thing we know about Socrates is Socrates had this kind of snub nose. I don't know if you can see this. He might have just been being ironic. That's not very, you can't really see it in this statue. Again, this statue wasn't like, Socrates didn't sit for the statue. You can see it a little bit here. But it was sort of like, see anybody has a nose that's like upturned like this. Like sort of has a pig-like effect, right? Called the snub nose. So Socrates seemed to have one of those. So it's kind of funny that he's making fun of Meletus. He's talking about him having this big beak of a nose. But other than that, we don't really know much about him. Oh, there they are. Antaeus, Meletus, and Lycon. There's no district attorney in ancient Greece. All criminal and civil prosecutions were done by private citizens. So you'd sort of take it up as your civic duty to prosecute someone if they committed a crime. And then you'd make a complaint, and you'd have some sort of magistrate that would go out with the city guard to collect the person, or they'd issue a summons, and the guy didn't show up, they go looking for him. And you actually see there's a dialogue, one of the first dialogues that Plato wrote called the Euthyphro, and Socrates is sitting on the court steps of the Athenian of the Athenian courthouse waiting to have his case heard, and he runs into his friend Euthyphro, and they start this dialogue on the nature of piety, and Euthyphro is there to prosecute his own father for murder, and he goes in this long-winded story about how his father's got these two slaves, and once they got into like a drunken brawl, and one slave kills the other slave, and then he takes the slave that was the murderer and throws him in a ditch, and then ties him up, throws him in a ditch, and sends off a messenger to the oracle of Apollo, which will actually come up in the Apology, to find out what he should do with the guy. Well, the messenger takes a while to get back. In the meantime, the guy dies of exposure. And so Euthyphro says, well, it doesn't matter that he's just a slave, and it doesn't matter that it was an accident. because justice means prosecuting somebody no matter who they are, even if they're your own father. And so he has this kind of lofty sense of justice, and they get into this debate about the nature of piety. But the point there is that this guy, he's not like a district attorney or something. He just says, well, here's a crime that's been committed, and so nobody going to speak up for this poor slave, so I'm going to take it on myself. Typically, like it's like a relative was killed. Like if one of your relatives was killed, you would you or someone in your family would do the prosecution. But here he's a slave with nobody to speak up for him, and Euthyphro says, I'm going to prosecute my own father for murder. Maybe, some issues growing up or something like that. So the apology is Socrates' defense before, oops, I'm missing a quote here, defense before the city-state of Athens. So apologia in ancient Greek just means defense, like before a courtroom. This isn't the I'm sorry of Socrates. Socrates is anything but sorry. He practically dares the jury to give him the death penalty. So it's apology in this sense just means like you have like, let's see, do I have it means like you have a thing called apologetics. It's this idea of defending. Usually it's like defending the faith. You have like people of different religions, particularly like evangelical Christians, will do Christian apologetics, which is like you're defending the historicity of the Bible or of Jesus or the existence of God, those sorts of things. Sometimes you'll hear somebody being an apologist, like if you say, oh, he's a Trump apologist or he's an Obama apologist. That means like that whatever outrageous thing that their guy says, they're going to try to defend it, right? So James Carville was a famous Clinton apologist. All right, so the apology is by Socrates, who's a student of Plato. We know most of what we know about Socrates is through Plato. There are some other people who wrote lives of Socrates or like biographies. There's references in other people's writings, historians, but most of it comes from Plato. Kind of a biased account. Again, we're not getting like, we never get to hear it from the prosecution, right? I mean, basically Socrates grills them and we see their short little answers, and we see Socrates lead them down the primrose path and into contradiction, into making foolish assertions. He goads them into saying things that they probably wish they could take back. And Socrates is kind of running the show in the apology. I'm sure if, the trial of Socrates by Antiochus Miletus and Lycon came out, it would probably tell a slightly different story. So what are the charges against Socrates? I think we have a few minutes to lay these out, and then we'll be out of time here. The first one is that he's an irreligious scientist. He's actually being accused of being one of these natural philosophers. And Socrates says, well, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I'm just not really interested in science. I'm more interested in knowledge and virtue and all these more philosophical things. And then he says, look at Anaxagoras. This guy is one of these natural philosophers. He says the sun is a rock and the earth is a moon, and everybody thought that was great. They thought he was profound and interesting, and they think he's awesome. And so why are you trying to kick around poor little Socrates? And I'm not even a scientist. So if you think Anaxagoras is great, why do you hate me? And then he's accused of being one of these sophists. And Socrates says, well, I don't take any fee for my teaching. He sort of had it a point of pride that he didn't take money for his teaching, leaving his family in poverty. And then the most important one is the charge of corrupting youth. And that seems to be the main charge. And number 4, religious, that he's a heretic. So we'll talk about these 4 charges next time, and particularly hone in on corrupting the youth. Socrates has a very long story about how people came to see him as a corrupter of youth and what he has to say for himself. See you next time.